Alrighty. I would like to welcome everyone to today's Discover the Power of Streamlining Salesforce and Intacct Data webinar. My name is Eric Nielsen, and I head up business development for DataBlend. DataBlend is your automated, integrated solution, streamlining your data between the various systems you use every day. We want to thank you all for joining us today. Just a few housekeeping items before we get started. The webinar is scheduled to last about 45 minutes. With some time at the end earmarked to answer some of your questions. You can enter your questions in the chat section of the Zoom panel. Please feel free to enter those questions throughout the webinar whenever they occur to you. We are recording this webinar and we will make it available in case you would like to watch it again or share it with any of your colleagues. With us today, we have the Director of DataBlend, Peter McIntyre, and we are excited to host this webinar today in collaboration with Carlson Management. And with us from Carlson is Joe Giorgio. Joe, take it away.
Hello, my name is Joe Giorgio. As Eric indicated, I am from Carlson Management Consulting. We are a value-added reseller, not only of Sage Intacct, but also Adaptive Insights. We have offices across the country and even in the UK. We have offices in Massachusetts, Vermont, Ohio, New Hampshire, and as I indicated, in the UK. We are a 9-time Adaptive Insights Award winner. We are a platinum partner. We have a tremendous amount of experience. We do upwards of 52,000 hours of consulting a year.
Hi everyone, I'm Peter McIntyre, Director at DataBlend. I've been with DataBlend a little over 3 years, focusing on product, operations, and client integrations. And prior to that, I was an Adaptive Insights consultant for about 6 years. Over that time period, I have integrated data from many different systems in many different ways. And I'm excited to show you our Salesforce and Sage Intacct integration capabilities today. So just a little bit about DataBlend. So DataBlend is a cloud integration platform as a service, and it allows users to build data integrations between various business systems. So as you can see here, these are a few of our most popular system connections. Obviously Sage Intacct and Salesforce, which we will be demonstrating today. But we also have the ability to connect to QuickBooks, both the online and desktop versions, Adaptive Insights, NetSuite, and any hosted or on-premise databases, whether it be SQL Server, MySQL, or PostgreSQL. DataBlend's not limited to the systems you see here. However, we can connect to other types of systems such as PSA, OpenAir, or MavenLink, for example, HR systems such as Bamboo HR, as well as many other ERPs, whether it be through an API connection, database server, or flat file via SFTP.
Thank you, Peter. This is a visual graphic to show you an example of how data can flow from Salesforce to Sage Intacct. This example is assuming that one has the contracts module in Sage Intacct, but that is not a requirement. You are not required to have the Sage Intacct contracts module. You are not required to have the Sage projects module. You are not required any of those modules. We can connect Salesforce to Intacct into any way that you are currently using Intacct. Some of the things that you might want to link between Sage Intacct are accounts, contacts, products or items, projects or opportunities, and many more. Those are some examples, and we're going to go through some of those examples through our demonstration today. So the very first demonstration we're going to go through is with the accounts in Salesforce. In Salesforce, you have accounts that typically link to customers in Sage Intacct. Any of the fields that you see on an account in Salesforce, or any of the fields that you see on a customer in Sage Intacct, can be linked together. The information can flow from Salesforce to Intacct or vice versa. It all depends upon your company's needs. So the very first example Peter is going to go through is customers and showing the use of a button to send over one customer at a time. Take it away, Peter.
Okay, so I am displaying Salesforce right now, and I will just start by saying I have 3 tabs open in my browser. So I have Salesforce, DataBlend, which I just want to sign back into, and Sage Intacct as well. So I will be flipping between 3 different tabs in my browser, just to let everyone know. So starting with Salesforce, so I'm gonna give an example of creating a brand new account in Salesforce and sending that over to Sage Intacct. So I'm just gonna start by clicking new account, and we'll give this a name of Dunder Mifflin. You can see I already have Dunder Mifflin there. And as you're creating your account, you can obviously fill out any fields you need to fill out to create your account. I'm just going to keep it simple. I'm going to go with account name. But again, any of these fields can be filled out, and based on what's been mapped to Sage Intacct can be sent over as well. So I'm just going to save my new account. And you can see once I have my account saved, and this would be the same for any existing account as well, we've set up this Create Intacct Customer button here in Salesforce. And what this is going to do when I click this button, it's first going to ask me, am I sure I want to send this over? But what essentially this will do is kick off a workflow that I've set up in DataBlend. So everything that's happening in DataBlend has been pre-built already. Basically, we're extracting data, specific sets of data out of Salesforce, formatting that data, and then sending it over to Sage Intacct. And all the data formatting and API calls happen within DataBlend. So what this button essentially is doing when I click it, it's going to kick off one of those workflows and make the integration happen. So I'm going to do that right here. I'm just going to click this Create Intacct Customer, which prompts me, are you sure you want to send this record to Sage Intacct via DataBlend? I just say OK, and my submission was successful. Now I'm going to jump to DataBlend real quick because it goes pretty quickly, but you can see I have an active workflow, Create Salesforce Customer in Intacct. It's in progress, the one I just kicked off. And if I refresh it again, it's complete. Actually, if I go to my logs, you'll see here is my workflow I just ran today at 2:09 p.m. So I know that it just completed. So now if I jump over to Sage Intacct, now I can go and I can check my customer list. And I should now see, which I do, my Dunder Mifflin customer came over. It's tagged with the internal ID that came directly from Salesforce. So you know that these two are linked together. Now, one other thing we can do, not only creating new customers, we can also update customers. So if there's any changes made to this particular customer, we can send those changes back over to Sage Intacct. Now I'm going to jump back to DataBlend for a second, and just to show how we do that. So here's my workflow in DataBlend that actually, just ran that integration for me. So you'll notice here in this blue step, I have a field mapping. So within this field mapping, again, it's a pretty simple workflow. I'm just bringing over account and ID from Salesforce to Sage Intacct. But what basically I'm doing here is I'm mapping the fields from Salesforce, account name and account ID, to customer name and customer ID in Sage Intacct. If I wanted to add any fields, I would just simply add line items here and map the available fields from Salesforce to the available fields in Sage Intacct. again, I'm just keeping it simple here. So the only other thing I'm going to do now, you can see my action is to create. I'm just going to change this to actually update and then just save my transformation. So now if I do make an update in Salesforce, which I'll do, and here's where I can now rename my account to Dunder Mifflin Scranton and save. So the same exact button will now update my customer in Sage Intacct. So I'm just going to click this one more time. Again, are you sure you want to send this over? Yes, I am. Submission successful. Come back to DataBlend. I see a workflow in progress. By the time I refresh Sage Intacct, I should see the update. So I'm just going to refresh my browser. And there we have it, Dunder Mifflin Scranton. So again, I just updated the customer name, but any other fields that have been mapped, any updates to those would be captured as well, you know, at the push of that button.
Great, thank you, Peter. So you might be asking, why are we using the button and why are we not automating this? The reason for that is because you typically do not want all of your accounts in Salesforce to become customers in Intacct. Typically, you have some opportunities that you may or may not close, and you don't want to crowd up your customer record in Sage Intacct with a bunch of accounts from Salesforce. So that's why we typically use the button for syncing one at a time project accounts for when you know that this is a closed opportunity that you need to create a customer for. Another piece of information I mentioned was the information could go one way or the information could go the other way. A typical example that people have would be putting a customer on hold. If you're familiar with the on hold functionality in Intacct, what that does is that stops you from creating more invoices for that customer. This would be something that typically a finance department would do, and they might not be spending a lot of time or any time in Salesforce. They might be strictly working in Sage Intacct. So in that case, you would want the on hold button in Intacct to update a piece of information, such as a on hold custom field in Salesforce. So that's it with the customers. The next example or demonstration that we're going to do are products. In Salesforce, we have products which link to Intacct items. The products are what you would expect. You would see anyone selling something, whether it's a good or a service. So it could be something like Amazon, where you're actually selling a good, or it could be a service where you are doing something like we do here at Carlson and DataBlend, where we implement products or implement applications. So the example that we're going to do is going to look very similar. We're going to create a product in Salesforce, have that sent over to Intacct, and again, we're going to use the button for a one-off because maybe you're not sure if you're going to start selling the product, or you don't want to create the product or item in Intacct until you actually have sold at least one. So we're going to continue to use that button example where that kicks off a workflow. So now I'm going to kick it over to Peter. Show us how it's done.
Okay, so I'm now in the product section of Salesforce, and same idea. I'm going to create a new product here. And today we will be selling paper. And again, any fields that you have here, including custom fields, we can capture. I'm just going to add a price to my paper product for right now. And we'll say this is top of the line paper, the most expensive paper out there, $500. And I'm just going to save that. So once your product has been created in Salesforce, same idea, you have this button available to you, create Intacct item. And again, when I click this, it's going to kick off a workflow within DataBlend and then create the item in Sage Intacct. So I'll run through the same process. Click the button. Are you sure you want to send this to Sage Intacct? Yes, I am. Submission successful. I'll jump to DataBlend again just to make sure. Yep, here's my product workflow that I just kicked off. And in a couple seconds, that should go away, which it has. And now when I go to Sage Intacct, I'm going to go to the items section. And there it is. There's my paper product, again, with my Salesforce ID. That now becomes my item ID and Intacct, so the two are linked together that way.
Thank you, Peter. So the reason that we recommend doing it this way is because it works seamlessly. The other piece of information that you may need to do, depending upon your setup in Sage Intacct, is when you are, after the item gets created in Sage Intacct, you are going to want to edit that product or item, and you're going to want to add the GL group. That GL group is the mapping that tells us how to code, what GL code that this item is linked to. So typically the salesperson does not know and where that item would get mapped to. So that's something you'd want to finish off in Sage Intacct. So as you saw from our example, that was not an issue. We were able to create the item in Intacct and without any error messages or warnings. It just created it. So then at your leisure, you could create or add that GL group to the item. So that's it for items or products. The next demonstration we're going to do is we're going to show you how you can create a project in Sage Intacct from an opportunity in Salesforce. Again, this makes sense to flow from Salesforce to Sage Intacct because an opportunity might not always become a project. You might not win every single opportunity. If you do, that is amazing. Congratulations to you. But unfortunately, we're all not that lucky. So Peter's going to show us how we are going to create an opportunity in Salesforce and have it flow over, again, with that button, because we're not going to want to send all opportunities over. And on top of it, we are going to control what fields are going to show up in Intacct and which ones will stay in Salesforce. Not every field in Salesforce needs to come over to Sage Intacct. Only the ones that are relevant to the finance accounting department or needed for the setup of a project for the Intacct configuration. So Peter, take it away.
Okay, so I'm in the opportunities section of Salesforce. Same concept. I'm going to create a new opportunity, and we'll call this Dunder Mifflin closed opportunity. Keep it simple. I'm going to search for Dunder Mifflin, my account I just created. Dunder Mifflin Scranton now. We'll call this new business, and we won this deal. So great job, everybody. Make a close date of today for $500. Again, I could fill out the rest of these fields if I wanted to pull that data over. For right now, I'm just going to save and add my product that I created. So here's my paper that I created earlier. I'm just going to select that and select it here. Say this is a DataBlend product family. So quantity of 1 for $500. Save my opportunity, which is displayed here. So you'll notice 2 buttons here. Right now, we're focusing on just creating the project in Sage Intacct. So I'm going to start with that. So again, same concept. I'm just going to click the button, and I get my prompts. Click OK. DataBlend should now show me an active workflow, which it does. And now it's complete. And going back to Sage Intacct, I'm now going to look at my projects. And there is my Dunder Mifflin closed opportunity ready to be viewed and edited from here as well.
Perfect. So again, that was how you create a project in Intacct seamlessly. The great thing about that is the same as what we saw with the customers and the products or items, and that is the elimination of duplicate entry. Anyone that is currently using Sage Intacct and Salesforce that does not have a connector is having to do all this work, duplicate all this work, which means it's taking you pretty much double the amount of time to do all of this. So again, we control which fields come over to Sage Intacct. Not all of them have to come over to Sage Intacct, and we can do the same updating projects just like we showed you updating customers. The other piece of information that might be helpful is you can send information back into Salesforce if you so choose with those that project information. So if there's pieces of information that you finalize, the finance team finalizes in Intacct, you can send that back over to Salesforce if you choose. It does not have to be a one-way street. It can be one-way street for certain fields and then a different one-way for other fields. We do not recommend going two ways typically, unless there's a very good business case, because then you could have opportunity for people to overwrite each other's information, and that's the last thing that you want. So the last demonstration that we're going to do is showing the Salesforce opportunity becoming a Sage Intacct invoice. So that is probably where people find the most amount of time savings, is because that is what typically takes the most amount of time to set up in Sage Intacct and where you want it to be most accurate. Typically, you want to make sure that you are not sending incorrect invoices to your customers. So you're going to want to match that up to any sort of quote, any sort of opportunity that you've put into Salesforce. So you are not only eliminating the duplicate entry here, you are also greatly limiting the amount of opportunity for errors. So now Peter is going to show us how to turn this opportunity into an invoice.
So I'm within the same opportunity I created before. So instead of creating a project, this time I just want to create an invoice using the same exact opportunity. So we have a separate button for this, separate workflow in DataBlend to create the invoice, essentially is what is happening here. So I'm just going to click the Create Intacct Invoice button. I get the same prompts that I've been getting all along. One last check on my workflow. My closed one opportunity to OE invoice workflow has kicked off. And now it's complete. So this should bring together really all the, everything I just input, the account, the product, the opportunity, all together into an invoice here. So if I look at my sales order list in Sage Intacct, we see my Dunder Mifflin Scranton invoice right here. And again, you can view or edit this after it's been created. And if I just click edit, we can see here's my paper product that came through, $500, today's date, and any other information I may have entered and mapped would show up here as well.
So thank you, Peter. So as Peter indicated, any field that you have mapped will show up here. Some of the fields that people typically want, not only location, but they want the other dimensions, not only location and item and project, but the other dimensions such as department and class. That is totally doable within this integration. We would just need to create that, maintain, either we need some sort of mapping that would say when we use this item, use this department or class or class, or we need to have people choose the department or class within Sage, within Salesforce. That means we would need to maintain a list in Salesforce, which we also can do with this integration, where it would be a maintain list where as you create new departments and classes in Intacct, you would then create them automatically in Salesforce. So again, only information that is absolutely required by Intacct is needed to be mapped, but any additional information that you choose can be mapped. The other piece of information that I would like to mention is this is a sales order. This is a transaction definition. We can send over this information over to any transaction definition within Intacct. It can be the sales quote, the sales order, the sales invoice, or a customized transaction definition. If the reason that some people do that is they would like to have a review process before anything becomes an official invoice. So that's why we typically have it come over to a sales order, allow the finance person to review it, convert it to an invoice, and then send that out to your customer. So those were our demonstrations for today. We have a couple more things that we'd like to mention and talk about, and then we will be opening it up to questions. So the first bullet point you can see is we're talking about bulk imports. So we've only been showing you the import one by one with the button. That is not required. That it can be done by bulk, simply by setting a schedule or having it on demand. Those would be done within DataBlend. They would not be done in Salesforce. They would not be done in Intacct. They would be done in DataBlend, where you can say you want it to run every hour, you want it to run overnight at midnight, however, whenever you want it to run, we would be able to set up a schedule for you. Or you could do it on demand, where you would go in and click a button and say, yes, go look for all new projects and create those. Typically, we caution against that to make sure that if we are doing it that way, we're making sure that we're filtering. We want to make sure that we filter and do not just bring in every opportunity, only, for example, new closed one opportunity possibly. So we can do that with accounts, opportunities, products, any of those we can do with this bulk import. And that it doesn't have to be a one-way process. For example, the bulk imports, typically we use that to bring the invoices back over into Salesforce. So that would be another custom object, custom list in Salesforce where you would be able to track the invoices on a project and it would allow you to mark them as paid or not in Salesforce. That way, your salespeople can very clearly see in Salesforce what's been invoiced, what hasn't been invoiced, what's been paid, what hasn't been paid. This, again, is going to save you a tremendous amount of time. So not only are you saving time on duplicate data entry, you're eliminating that. You're also reducing errors, so you're saving time on having to clean up errors. You're also saving time on questions. If you're able to share that information and only the pertinent information with the appropriate people, you can streamline the conversation you have with the sales department, finance and sales department. You don't have to worry about having questions going back and forth in email and losing track of those questions. Next bullet point talks about custom fields and objects. As I've been mentioning, the dimensions would be a custom object in Salesforce, where we would have that as a managed list where you would be able to say, here are my departments in Sage Intacct. Well, I want them to sync over and create a same list over in Salesforce. Finally, there is additional functionality in Sage Intacct that we didn't talk about that we can leverage with this integration. For example, observe % complete. Anyone that has revenue recognition can use the observe % complete process for recognizing the correct amount of revenue. So for example, when you are 75% done of a project and that project is estimated to be a $100,000 project, you would recognize $75,000 worth of revenue. Well, you can do that automatically in Sage Intacct by updating the observed percent complete on a project. What that does is that tells Intacct, hey, go recognize this revenue. That can be done in Sage Intacct or in Salesforce. We have the ability using DataBlend to send over the observed percent complete into Sage Intacct. So the scenario where this would make sense would be if you have a salesperson or a project manager updating that information and they already have access to Salesforce. They do not necessarily have access to Sage Intacct. And maybe this is the only thing that you want them to do that would be related to Sage Intacct. If that is the case, you don't want to use a license. You don't want to pay for a license just for this one thing, this one task that you want the person to do. You could use DataBlend to allow all your project managers to update the observed percent complete in Salesforce and have that pushed over seamlessly to Sage Intacct. Next is the project status. Not the status, but the project status in Sage Intacct is something that not a lot of people take advantage of. You could take advantage of the project status by using that functionality to lock down a project. Not necessarily just turn it on and turn it off, but turn it on and turn it off within different modules. So for example, you might be done entering invoices for a project, but you might still need to apply payments. You might still need to do a journal entry associated with that project. The project status is a field that can be leveraged to lock down the project from different modules or different functionality. And again, you can do that in Salesforce and use DataBlend to seamlessly send over that piece of information into Intacct. Finally, the last functionality that you can leverage with Sage Intacct and DataBlend in Salesforce is time and materials invoices. Not only can you fulfill orders, do a typical invoice like we showed you previously, but you also can do time and material. So if you are billing someone, billing your customer, your client, based on the number of hours on a timesheet, what you can do is you can use either the Sage Intacct timesheet or a third-party timesheet tool that integrates with Sage Intacct, such as Nexonia, and those will automatically create invoices within Sage Intacct. So you can leverage the customer being created through DataBlend. You can leverage the project being created through DataBlend. You can leverage even the items that you're selling or products that you're selling through DataBlend. You do not have to also leverage the invoices if you do not invoice the way that we showed you today. So those were just some additional functionality that we can take advantage of and certain scenarios that you might want to think about when working within Salesforce and or Sage Intacct. So at this point, that concludes our demonstration, and I will turn it back over to Eric.
Oh, thank you so much. Thank you both, Peter and Joe. I think that was very informative, and I know that everyone was definitely interested in what you were saying because we do have a bunch of questions here. So let's get to the first question is there a way to add an approval from the finance team for any creation of product or client pushed to Intacct?
So this is Peter. So we don't have any functionality for approvals in DataBlend. It's certainly something we can look into and put on our roadmap. And Joe, I don't know if there's any Intacct functionality that works the same way.
What I was thinking was we could develop the integration to send over the product or client over as a inactive. That way you can only allow inactive products or customers to be created. That way it serves as a little approval. Then you have to have someone go in Intacct. So you have the finance person go in Intacct and change it from inactive to active. So you could do that.
Excellent. Okay, great. Well, that's one of the great things about these solutions is we can come up with a custom solution and answer the question, which is great. The next question is, what sort of maintenance would I need to do on a monthly, quarterly, or yearly basis to make sure this continues to work?
So this is Joe. I'll take that question. The great thing about third-party integration tools like DataBlend is once it's set up, there's nothing that you need to do to maintain it unless you, for example, add enough additional module or change your functionality. Then there might, and keyword is might, need to tweak it, but typically there's little to no maintenance at all throughout the year. So once you set it up, it's good to go.
Excellent, excellent. So then our next question is, if I do a bulk import, can I filter my data before it gets sent to Intacct and vice versa?
Yeah, I'll take that one. So yes, and what I displayed within DataBlend, I showed that workflow. So essentially what you can do in DataBlend, it acts as an ETL tool. You can transform the data. So you have the ability to filter data, transform it, concatenate, use substring functionality, whatever might need to happen to the data in order for it to be formatted correctly can all happen with a DataBlend. So if you're doing a bulk import, we would set everything up beforehand so that it can work either on a schedule or ad hoc.
Excellent. Okay. The next question is, if I schedule my integration, how will it know what is new and what needs to be updated?
So we do have the ability to pull data from both systems. So you could, before we push data to one of the, either to Intacct or Salesforce, we can extract the data first and do various lookups on the data to see what's new and what has changed, and then perform the proper action based on those changes. So whether you're looking to create or update something, we could look for those changes in the data and then only create or update the object in Salesforce or Sage Intacct based on the differences between the two systems.
Okay, great. The next question is, can you do the same type of integrations with Salesforce and another accounting system?
Yeah, so that's the great thing about DataBlend. It is an integration platform. So we have the ability to connect to these other systems that I mentioned earlier in the webinar. Some of them it's just a matter of, developing the connection, whether it be a NetSuite or QuickBooks Online, for example. So we have a few more, ERP integrations on our roadmap that we're certainly going to look to leverage the same capabilities.
Okay, great. And what looks like our last question here today is it possible to have a real-time integration, meaning when I enter something into Salesforce, it will automatically flow over to Intacct?
Another good question. Yeah, so this is a possibility. So this is more of a trigger-based integration. And what that means is, essentially when you create something in Salesforce, it would automatically flow over to Sage Intacct without even having to push a button. So it's definitely a possibility. It's not something we have, we don't have that functionality in DataBlend currently. But again, something we're looking into adding as a feature down the road.
Excellent, great. Thank you so much. I want to take this opportunity to thank both you and Peter and Joe for your time today and explaining this to our attendees. I want to thank all of the attendees for joining us. We hope that you have gotten value out of this. If you have any questions, feel free to reach out to us. You see on your screen there is our contact information. Again, Peter is the director there. Myself, Eric Nielsen, I am the business rep here at DataBlend. And then Joe Giorgio over at Alight, there's his email there, and that's how you can get in touch with us. We'll be more than glad to talk to you about these connections or any other questions that you may have. We hope that you have a great day, and we hope to see you next time.